today's tutorial, I will be using a size H crochet hook. You'll also need 2 medium-sized buttons. The yarn I'm using today is the 1-pounder from Karen because I have so much of this because I ended up buying like 4 of these with no intention of knowing what I was going to do with them. You'll also need a pair of scissors and a yarn needle. So I'm going to start off my project with a slip knot. So again, how I make my slip knot is, go ahead and extend my first finger, wrap it around twice, hold it at the bottom, back loop, front loop, pull the back loop over the front. Now back loop, front loop, back over front, and off your finger. Put your hook in and pull down. Now you want to chain a multiple of 2 plus 1. So I'm going to chain 19 because my multiple of 2 is 18 plus 1 for my turning chain. So for this tutorial you want to figure out how long you want your wrist warmers to be. It needs to come up to about right here and then as far down as you need. So you can go ahead and start chaining. I've chained 19. And see if I can show you. I'm just going to make that top loop bigger, slide it over my finger. That's about how high I want it to come up. And I want it to come maybe 1.5 inches past my wrist. So I've chained 19. That's a multiple of 2 plus 1 for your turning chain, because you know you don't count your turning chain. So just like the moss stitch ear warmer, we're going to do the moss stitch again, and I'll go ahead and show you again how that's done. So you have your turning chain, and then your even number of stitches behind it. I have 18 plus 1, so I have 19. So I skip this last chain that I made and I go into the next stitch, and the pattern for the moss stitch is first you want to do a slip stitch, and if you need to, that first stitch you just made, go ahead and place a stitch marker so you know where you need to go back into on the next round, because sometimes it's hard to miss that slip stitch on the end. Our next one is a half double crochet. So we yarn over, go into the next one, yarn over and pull up a loop. There's 3 loops on your hook. Yarn over, pull through all 3. Then you just want to alternate those 2. Slip stitch, half double crochet. And again, slip stitch, so go in, yarn over and pull through a loop, and also pull it through the loop on your hook. Then next stitch, half double crochet. Now if you had an even number plus your turning chain and you skipped your turning chain, then you're always going to start your row with a slip stitch. You're always going to end your row with a half double crochet. So go ahead and do this, alternating slip stitch and half double crochet all the way to the end of your first row. So I'm at the last 2 stitches of my row. My next stitch is a slip stitch. My last one is always a half double crochet. So you have your first row. You want to chain 1, turn it over, and now looking at the top, this first one right here, that is your turning chain, so you skip that. And so right here, skip this one, and you want to go into the next one with your first slip stitch for this row. And if you need to, go ahead and grab another stitch marker, whoop, and mark the first stitch that you made so that you know that you're not so you know not to miss that one when you're coming back. So I can tell from behind where I'm supposed to go into, but if you can't, always just turn it and look at your V's. So the first stitch was our slip stitch. That means the next one is going to be a half double crochet. And then you'll just keep alternating slip stitch, half double, slip stitch, half double. And just like the row before, you always start with a slip stitch. You'll always end with a half double crochet. Alright, so I'm at my last stitch that I marked with a stitch marker. I've already done my slip stitch before my final stitch, which is the half double crochet. And don't fall. I'm gonna take out my stitch marker, and I'm gonna put my half double crochet into my last stitch that I had marked. If you don't need stitch markers, that's totally fine. I added that in there for people that aren't sure where they're supposed to be going, because that was a really big struggle of mine when I first started. Alright, so we're at the end of the row. We chain one, turn it around, and then you just do the same thing row after row until this is long enough to wrap completely around your hand. I'm going to go ahead and continue going until this wraps around my hand, and I will come back and show you what it's supposed to look like. Alright, so I got done with as many rows as I needed. And what I did was every so often I would wrap it around my hand to see if it would fit. So we want to go ahead and fold it kind of like a taco. Wrap it around your hand. Place it on your hand where you want it to go. And then just make sure that the two sides at the top meet up with a little bit, barely any stretch to it. You don't want to stretch it too much, but you also don't want it to be too loose. You want these sides to kind of just meet. Now go ahead and lay it on top of your hand. Turn your hand to the side with it in the exact spot you want it to be. And hold your hand back. See the stitch right where above your finger starts. Go ahead and put a stitch marker right there. And this is where we close in the top. Then you can go ahead, flip it over. And maybe about half an inch under your thumb knuckle here, place another one. Now in between these two stitch markers is going to be the opening for your thumb. Go ahead and cut about, go ahead and pull it through, tighten it up, fold it in half, and this is where your yarn needle comes in handy. We're going to start sewing it closed. So if you have trouble threading your yarn needle, go ahead and take the needle, lay your yarn over it, pinch down, slide your needle out, pinch down a little more, and just go ahead and saw it on. It should jump right on. Now you just want to line up your ends and start sewing from the very top to the to the first stitch marker. So right here we're going to sew that closed. So just go in one and the other. Go a little space down. And make sure you don't go in too far. Create a little hole if you want to. Just sew one side to the other. And my fourth spot is going to be right where that stitch marker is. You want to go ahead and pop it through to the inside. And from the inside I kind of just wind it through so I know it stays secure. Go ahead and cut that off. Now I failed to remember to do this, but before you start your project you can give yourself a long tail in the beginning. Then you can just use this end to sew up this side instead of having to add another one. I gave myself kind of a long tail. So then you just take your needle if you need to, go ahead and just open it up so you can see. And the last one, right where your stitch marker is. Then again, I'm just going to pick a spot a little bit away, pop it through, flip it inside out, sew it through a couple stitches before I cut off the yarn. Now they look exactly the same on either side, so just pick which side you think looks best and go ahead and slide it on your hand. Now the only issue is this gets kind of baggy around the wrist, so what we're also going to do is, this is when our buttons come in handy, is we're going to add a button and we're going to add a strap to go around it. So you can use any kind of button and any kind of needle as long as your needle fits through the buttonholes. I actually have a quite smaller needle than the one I normally use also. So I'm going to use the smaller one. And if you have thread, you can go ahead and use thread. I actually like to use the same color as I'm using. So what I do is I take that, it's about a foot long of yarn, longer if you maybe need more, and I split it in half because it comes with, 4 strands. I split it in half, and I'm going to use 2 strands to sew my button on with my smaller needle. So go ahead and put your glove on. Grab a stitch marker. So while it's on, go ahead and place your stitch marker where you want that button to go, and you want it to be about an inch from the bottom or directly over your wrist bone. I'm going to go ahead and there we go. And if it's easier for you to make both gloves, then go ahead and make both and then put buttons on both, because you don't want to get them mixed up. One's going to be on one side, one's going to be on the other. You don't want to get confused. So if you need to make both of these first, go ahead and stop the video and make this one again for your other hand, and then you'd place your button on the other one. So now that we know where our button's going to go, we'll take it off and we'll sew our button right where our stitch marker is. So I put a slip knot on my hook, and I'm going to make 5 single crochet stitches across about the width of the button, maybe a little wider than the button. So I'm going to place my hook in a space. You kind of just got to find a space. I'm going to take the glove off. And I'm going to make my first, I'm going to connect it, but I'm also going to make that connection a single crochet. So here we go with a single crochet. Now if you need to stitch mark it to know where your first stitch is, that's totally fine. Now we need to make 4 more. So I usually put my finger in so I know not to go too far. And I'm crocheting over my tail end here. Pick another spot. Make sure it lines up with the last one. And you just want to go in a straight line headed down. It can be kind of tricky, but you'll get it. It's probably the hardest part of the entire glove. And probably shouldn't call them gloves because the gloves have fingers. This doesn't have fingers. These are more like mittens, fingerless mittens. Alright, so I've made my 5. They're in a straight line down, and that's the start of our wrist, the band. So you have your 5 single crochet, chain 1, turn it around. So you skip your turning chain, that chain 1 you just made. You go into the next one, which is going to be your first single crochet. And again, if you need to mark your first stitch to know where to end, go ahead and do so. And then just single crochet in the next 4. There's 2, 3, 4. There's one last stitch because my marker's there. Take it out. And 5. So go ahead and continue single crocheting 5 across until it's long enough to wrap around the underside of the mitten, and we're going to make a buttonhole to hold it on. I did a bunch of rows of single crochet, and what you're going to do is it's going to wrap around under, it's going to come back around, and you want to pull it not too tight, just tight enough to where it's comfortable on you, and you want it to end just before the button, because I think I'm going to do one more row just so it's a little closer, because after that we're going to be making the buttonhole. And to make our buttonhole, we are going to put a single crochet in the first stitch. We're going to chain 3. 1, 2, 3. We're going to skip the 3 center chains, and we're just going to do a single crochet in the last stitch, the 5th stitch. Then chain 1, turn it around, single crochet into the first stitch, and since there's no stitches, what we're going to do is we're going to go around with 3 single crochets around. 1, 2, 3, and then our last stitch right here, That's our 5th stitch. There we go, get in there. Right there, we're going to do single crochet. Chain 1, turn it one more time, and put 1 slip stitch in every chain across. So 5 slip stitches across that end. And 5. And you chain 1. Pull it through. Now I'm just going to sew in on my ends and I'm done with the left mitten. Alright, so we're done. I've sewn in on my ends. I'm going to put it on one last time. And you want to go under, bring it over. Now when you go to make your left one, place your button above the bone. And then always go away from your body, or if it's this is my right hand, go toward the right. If it was your left hand, you'd go towards the left. Place your button above the bone, and then right hand, so you're going to go to the right of the button, and that's where you start your strap. These are a great gift, and they are the perfect addition to the Moss Stitch ear warmer because it matches it. It's using the same stitch. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me, and I'll see you in the next video.